welcome back to Binge Battle here on Rotten Tomatoes. I am your host, Mark Ellis, and we are about to go way, way, way back in time, at least as far as the chronology of The Lord of the Rings goes. The trilogy came out in the early 2000s, and we adored it, won a bunch of Oscars. We got 3 more movies that were the prequels to that original trilogy, the Hobbit trilogy, as it's known. But now, thanks to Amazon and $1 billion later, we get to go thousands of years to the second age of Middle-earth, and we get to see how the Rings of Power were forged in the new series, accurately called The Rings of Power. You've probably been enjoying it so far, and today we have 2 wonderful panelists who are going to be debating all things Rings of Power. And if you're a returning favorite to the show or you're tuning in for the very first time, there is a spoiler alert in effect for all things Rings of Power. And I'll be honest with y'all, probably Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. So just, you've been warned. If you haven't checked any of that content out yet, might want to hit pause on this and then come on back when you're ready to listen, to watch, to enjoy a spirited competitive debate that's all in good fun. We're really just here to celebrate Rings of Power and the fact that we get more Lord of the Rings greatness in our lives. I think at least 5 seasons for season 2 is already shooting, but this is going to be focused on season 1. So we got all the stuff out of the way. Make sure for any updates on Rings of Power or anything in the world of TV, movies in between, you head over to RottenTomatoes.com. And with that, we are going to introduce panelist number 1, who is a self-described pop culture addict and a wonderful host to boot. It is Blakely Thornton. Welcome to the program, Blakely.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here and talk about metals that create magic with everyone here.
That is, you have picked the right show. Let me take you back in time to the early 2000s when the Lord of the Rings films were coming out. Were you super into it? Are you lining up to see these movies night one, or did you sort of come to them later and appreciate Tolkien in retrospect?
I mean, I was a closeted teenage boy, so like obviously fantasy was my jam. So I was thoroughly invested in, the silver-haired elves driving down backs, the arrows, Orlando Bloom, all of it. It was all in my wheelhouse. So I did not go back and watch all of them, but I viscerally remember them with, the sense memory of a queer teenager. So I'm ready. I'm here for it.
And so then Rings of Power gets announced that it's going to be this massive undertaking by Amazon. And are you like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for? Were you a little apprehensive because we got these great movies and sometimes you don't want to go back to the well once too often?
I am a little apprehensive. I was a little apprehensive because I feel everything is now kind of become an IP grab, whether it's the MCU or Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. And I hope sometimes they do it right, because especially when you do prequels, which I think is also becoming a tendency in television, you are burdened by the weight of everybody knowing where the thing goes. So you have to really make the journey. Everybody says the journey is the most interesting part, but sometimes I feel like a lot of TV writers and producers miss that. So I was cautiously optimistic when this was announced.
Cautiously optimistic. Well, I'm a little more positive feeling about your chances here today, but you also have a great opponent, and she is a really a dear friend of mine from way back. We've gone back decades just kind of working in this space together. She's a travel expert, but you also probably know her from her work on Sci-Fi and Marvel. She'll steer you right on a cruise ship. It is Andrea Fechko. Hello, Andrea. Once again, we're back. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we almost know each other as much as Lord of the Rings has been out, right? Almost 20 years.
We just kind of cross paths every so often. And so let me ask you the same question I posed to Blakely: is when Lord of the Rings is coming out, and this is over 20 years ago, is this like your movie, or were you like, oh yeah, that kind of sounds I
thought I was gonna be an above average watcher because I watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I actually just watched the Two Towers recently. I went to New Zealand and actually went on the Lord of the Rings tour. I read The Hobbit in high school. I didn't realize 20 years went by and I didn't retain anything. So it took me until episode 3 to realize it was a prequel, and I was like, Galadriel, oh, that's Cate Blanchett. Wow, I'm behind. So I actually really went in with almost a purist perspective, not knowing anything. And it was really fun that way.
Y'all sound like me watching House of the Dragon, where I'm trying to piece together and I'm trying to remember names and stuff. I'm taking notes. I have extensive notepads, just trying to remember who everybody's face is. And so with Rings of Power, as Blakely so eloquently acts as the example, you got to keep this stuff straight. But once you do, and you start to sort of feel your way around this world, it really is a rewarding experience. At least that's my take on season 1. But now we're about to get into Binge Battle and get the take of Fetchko and Thornton. Here we go. Binge Battle is now in session. Keep in mind, 5 rounds is what we're prepared for. At least 4 rounds is what we're getting through. You each have an opening argument and go up to about a minute. Then you have a rebuttal that's about 30 seconds. And then your closing mic drop statement. Try to be about 10, 15 seconds with that one, because we do have some juicy rounds and we want to get to all of them. So round 1 starts now, and we're going to kick off with Andrea Fetchko. And Andrea, your question today in round 1, what are your overall thoughts on the show? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it okay? Where do you stand on season 1?
I stand as it's good, and I would actually describe it as epic. Well, I don't know if you know, but the cinematography, visual effects, set design is incredible. They actually spent $500 million, I think, just on season 1, but half of that was just for the rights. So then when you think about it, it really looks like each episode is about an hour long. It looks like $200 million was brought into each one. Like, for example, there's the scene in this Numenor where there's all these scrolls and everything. And you're looking around and you're like, that each scroll looks like it was about 10 grand to make. And then you're never going to see it again. The costuming was incredible. I thought the acting was very impressive. We're talking about Game of Thrones. 2 Game of Thrones people were in there. Actually, the Stark boys, young Ned Stark, and then Benjen Stark were in there. And then when you actually see them in The Power of the Rings, totally different characters. The depth of the source material, I agree with you, was incredible. I love things that I can nerd out on and that have great YouTube videos and podcasts later. So now I'm loving all Emergency Awesome and Rotten Tomatoes and all these that are coming out with all the Easter eggs that I missed. And now I'm really getting into Tolkien. I found out his name was Tolkien, not Tolkien. And he was based on Beowulf. So now I'm like, oh, I have all these things that I need to nerd out on. So I absolutely loved it. And also shout out to music. Bear McCreary, he did The Walking Dead and Battlestar Galactica. And then when you hear this music, it's like a new character. Fantastic job. So great job. Great first season. I wanted to keep on saying more.
All right, epic. And I'm glad you brought up the music too, because it was really cool to have Howard Shore do the theme and then Bear McCreary come in and do the music. And it's a lot. It's an undertaking, as you said, but it kind of makes you want to stay in that world and get to know it a lot better. Let's go over to Blakely for your take on season 1. Good, bad, epic, terrible, mad?
My take on it is actually that it was okay. I think, again, there was an incredibly rich source material. But I do think, again, prequels always bear the burden of essentially having to build a puzzle that we know how the final piece looks. And I feel like after watching it, it was incredibly lush. But even in the first couple of episodes where the battles Galadriel was in, it felt like we were moving from incredibly expensive set piece to an incredibly expensive set piece. It was crazy. I can see the millions of dollars. I can see the depth and the cinematography and the music. Talk, talk, talk. Huge new monster. Talk, talk, talk. Huge new battle. It felt like we were doing almost like a waltz with $30 million every step. And it bore the weight of, again, always, I feel like in industries the pilot's almost the most difficult episode. This felt like an 8-episode pilot in a way where it's okay, now we have the Rings of Power. Now we have now we have, Cate Blanchett. We know who she is. Now we know who, Gandalf and Sauron are. Let's go. And I was now I'm excited. I had to kind of almost slog through this prologue of people walking from place to place and wondering who everybody was. But in reality, I mean, by you're one of these guys is Gandalf and one of these guys is Sauron. I'm come on, let's get to it. I don't need $40 million and 45 more minutes. I got a job, baby. So I think it was lush and beautiful, but I'm way more excited for season 2 now that the chessboard has been set and we can now knock some pieces down.
It's funny you bring that up, because it's almost like we just get a nice sigh of relief after season 1, because we know how expensive it is. And we're okay, just don't, you can't win a golf tournament on the first day, but you can certainly lose it. And so we just wanted to get to know all the players, and we want to make sure that this was money well spent. Seems like you both have that feeling about it. So let's go back to Andrea and give me more about why this is so epic.
For the same reason that Blake is saying that it's okay. Yeah, no, it is really epic. it is television is a visual medium, so you want to see these things come to life, and it's really, really beautiful. It's really relaxing. There's definitely a tone that's different from, let's say, Game of Thrones that's out at the same time, or House of the Dragon. So it did feel different. It didn't feel like they were going after someone else. I also feel like with you're talking about the source material, I actually didn't, even though I'd watched it before, I didn't know that it was a prequel, and I actually felt like I should have actually gotten a little bit more information because I didn't get all the hints. So I thought on the second viewing, it was actually a lot better. And I enjoyed that. As someone that's watched the movies and read a book, I thought that the binge part of it, the second time around, was great and excellent and added to it.
And I like your point that
everything.
it is so nice that everybody seems to be tuning into this show. Their opinions may vary, but at least we get a lot of coverage after the fact, so we can educate folks like me. Like, wait, who is that? Who are they talking to? That sort of stuff. Blakely, you just thought the season was okay. So I'm just wondering for you, did it pick up momentum? Did it just feel like one sort of slog?
I think from episode 6 on, the momentum picked up, but episodes 1 through 5 really felt like, we're building the world. We're showing you these people. Here are the elves. Here are the orcs. Let's talk in a couple of languages. There are things that I was already familiar with from the previous movies, but did not have as much emotional investment in, probably because I'm not a teenager, and also because I knew kind of where things were going to go. And also, I think from my particular lens, I think when I see fantasy, and this is also just my particular kind of like pet peeve, I always want to see a lot more feminism, and I want to see a lot more diversity in these things. And I think there's always opportunities to do that when you're playing with a 2022 deck of cards and $1 billion. So I feel like for me, it's like, okay, cool. We're still having, Caucasian blondes play elves, and the one elf that is a little bit dark is kind of in a slave culture, getting thrown into a pit. I'm like, ooh, what a fantasy, America. Good job. Let's really reinvent the wheel. Or even kind of with Galadriel. I'm just like, I think it ultimately ends up being about her versus Sauron, which I think is amazing. But the whole queen offer, I feel like I want to see a little bit of more bucking of gender roles and racial stereotypes, because it's supposed to be fantasy, and they played very 1887 with that in this one. So I wasn't really impressed with that.
And I think that's a fair point. I mean, you have, like you said, it's 2022. We're a progressive society, or at least we hope to be. And you have so much money you're investing into that. Plus, it's Middle Earth. So use the entire sandbox, so to speak.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Andrea for your final statement here in round number 1.
Final statement, I think, is very brave. And I feel like with a lot of these companies, we as the audience should applaud for things that we want to see. I want to see people take risks. I want to see money being put into great television. So I want to be part of those people that I want to see more things like this on television. And also learning about later how many restrictions they had. $250 million still didn't get them all the rights. And then when you get to these things like the opening sequence is kind of a nod to how the creation of that world was through music. And so they used the like sand with music to create that opening sequence. There's a lot of layers that they actually did go into it. And I think that should be applauded. And that's what I'm saying. It's good. And it definitely was epic.
All right. So we got good and epic from Andrea, and we get okay. Blakely, your final defense is now.
My final defense is that it was great. It was an 8-hour setting of a chessboard for me. And while it was beautiful and lush and interesting, I feel like I wasn't viscerally connected to anything for the first 5 hours. So that's why I'm giving it an okay, because over half of it was me watching a puzzle be put together. A very expensive, very beautiful, very lush puzzle, but I could have basically Wikipedia the first 5 episodes, then gone from 6 through 8, and then had next season happen.
I mean, look, it's why when we go to a bar to shoot pool, you have the new person come in and rack them, because we're tired of racking. We just want to actually play and move these pool balls around a little bit. For this, I feel like y'all both made great points just about how expensive it is. I mean, we basically sound like shareholders in the meeting when we're talking about how much money we're spending. But if you get away from the dollars and cents of it, I agree with Andrea that there is certainly an epic feel to it, and the music and the lush environments and just the breadth of the cast and all these different types of folks walking around. It's an amazing thing to watch. I happen to just side a little bit more with Blakely as far as it got to an epic feel by the end of season 1. But I feel like a lot of those earlier episodes were just, okay in terms of, okay, I'm understanding that you're setting this up, but I just want a little more meat on the bone. Certainly got that with some episodes later in the season, but I'm going to give Blakely the point here in round number 1, just because I'm not quite gaga about the series yet. I agree with Andre, it's epic. And so now maybe we feel a little more strongly about particular episodes, which is what we're tackling here in round number 2, where our topic is going to be, what is the best episode? The best episode of season 1 of Rings of Power. He took the point in round 1, and now, Blakely, you are on the clock first here in round 2 for your opening statement.
Okay, I think the best episode of season 1 of Lord of the Rings of Power, is the finale Alloyed, because it's when we finally get to see the thing that's the thing. We know who's the evil sorcerer, we know who the good sorcerer is. We have battles, we have vendettas, we have vengeance, we have a cliffhanger for next season, and also a firm conclusion to this one. I also just really love a good heel turn. I love a good, like, who's behind the candelabra. That wasn't an accurate, I think, analogy, but I'm gonna stay with it. So I think we're gonna get a more kind of firmly entrenched Galadriel in season 2, because she's like, now you are my enemy, you have betrayed me, you have tricked me for this long period of time, I have wasted time, effort, and my life energy on you, and like seeing people die because of this BS. Ooh, I almost cursed there. But I love it, as I feel like things rarely land the plane and get you excited for the next flight, and this really did it.
I like the way you said that. It did. We landed the plane. We had some turbulence when we first took off. We might have had to land and refuel, but we got the plane on the ground. And I think I speak for everybody here, where I'm really excited about season 2. Episode 8 certainly a nice way to usher us into that. And now we play the waiting game. Let's go to Andrea. What was your episode? You seem to be a bigger fan of season 1, so I'm curious as to which episode really hooked you the most.
Episode 6 by far. So if you like the second of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Two Towers, that was my favorite. I loved episode 6. So episode 8 was great and it had a great reveal, but I felt like episode 6 was way more action packed. You also didn't get like 20 minutes of the pre-Hobbits goodbye. That was a little bit long for me.
They do that every movie, though. I'm sorry.
I know.
And they're always like, what? Isn't it over?
It's always a little bit too long, right? But I really thought it was really action-packed. So it's a big battle scene. It's about the orcs and versus the humans. And I thought that it was going to end. And then it went on again. And then there was another one. And I actually had to stop in the middle of it because I was so nervous. Actually, I like going to the other room and hug my dog, Bodhi, because I got anxiety. So that's when I know that it's a good battle scene. I also really liked, all the shocks about the twist, not only with the battle, but then there were some other things that had happened that were setting up also for the episode 8. So one of the reasons episode 8 is so good is because episode 6 puts together the reveal and a lot of the things that are going to happen in episode 8 to reveal that who is Sauron. So especially when you go back, you're going to be able to see that. I thought the acting was brilliant, especially with Adar. Joseph Mawle, he's in an interrogation scene with Galadriel. And it's such subtle acting, incredible. And yeah, so I think that's kind of all of it. It's action-packed. It really sets up. It's a lot of good cliffhangers. And then on second viewing, you see a lot of the subtle clues, even in the costuming that you're going to see later that makes episode 8 so great. So without 6, episode 8 would be like, meow.
I love that you watch Rings of Power the same way that I watch the NFL, and Washington usually need to go in the other room and hug the dog after we lost again. It's a different conversation, but it's probably streaming on Amazon. So let's go back to you, Blakely, and let's hear a little bit more about episode 8 and why it landed the plane so well.
I think episode 8 landed the plane so well because I think if you didn't know it was a prequel, it gave you clear stakes for what was going on next season in terms of we have Galadriel versus Sauron. You have, kind of Gandalf the Grey or Gandalf the White at this time. I forget if he's gray or white at this point up in there. You know what's going on. So I feel like it gave you that completion if you were familiar. It gave you now an emotional connection if you were not. And I feel like those vendettas are set. And I feel like it kind of merges what so many places where they have older kind of lush IP trying to do is trying to actually satisfy a fanboy and bring in a new audience, which I feel like episode 8 did. And that's what you're looking for across any kind of IP, whether it's getting an X-Men, an Avengers, a Game of Thrones, and seeing that. And it doesn't matter whether you had watched the other movies or just watched this. pushing the stakes and giving a satisfying emotional ending for all parties involved or every kind of watcher is really why I thought it was the best for me.
That's a wonderful point you made. All you young kids out there, I know you love making your TikToks. When you're making art for streaming, for movies, get the audience that you're aiming for, but bring new folks in as well. Andrea, back to you, stumping for episode 6. It's funny y'all both picked later episodes in the season. So let's hear more about your episode numero 6.
Well, I agree with Blake's first point that it's a lot of world building, chess building type of thing. I mean, they have 5 episodes, so they could do that. But especially for episode 6, I kind of forgot there was a huge reveal at the end. There were so many different twists with the orc battles that it was like actually 3 battles in one episode. But at the very end, then you learn that the Southlands is Mordor. So that's a huge, huge reveal. And that's just in the middle. And then there's a volcano blast that comes in. I thought also, again, they did the subtle clues of, there's this sword that kind of brings together Mordor, and they do a really good job of not showing the audience beforehand. So it's a shock to us as well. And then even again, on going back into viewing, when everyone has this incredible armor, which again, the visuals are so incredible, then you go back and you see that Halbrand's armor is actually rings. Again, super subtle, smart things that they're doing. And then you go back and you kind of learn about this and you can appreciate everything that goes on. And again, I like battle scenes. Talking is great. Battle is better. Seeing some humans kick some orc butt. I loved it. 2 thumbs up. Again, I'm a huge fan of Two Towers, the second one of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So yeah, I was all about this. And the elves, our elves did a really good job in this episode.
The elves came to play. The armor came to play. It was really disappointing going to the gym the next day, not getting to wear armor like that.
Yeah.
Let's go back to you, Blakely, now with your sort of final salvo here in round number 2.
I mean, I think my final salvo is it sets the table and sets the stage. We finished the dinner and we're ready for dessert. I think it gets us excited for what's going to happen. And I think while the reveal of Mordor, et cetera, being revealed, I like the reveals about character more than places. And I also think they might have a bigger effect because they affect the actions and the action going forward. And I feel like, honestly, if you hadn't watched the films before, you wouldn't understand the reveal of that location.
All right, so let's go back to Andrea. Your final statement here, and again, you're sort of like me. You like the characters, but you love the battles.
Oh yeah. Blake, come on. I mean, there's Mordor. You're not going to know what Mordor is. Like that's huge.
Have you talked to people from Gen Z?
If I feel like you're going to remember anything, it's Mordor and it works versus Sauron and the Eye and the rings.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least I did. Maybe that's me in 20 years. I need to be doing some like special tea or whatever for my brain. But I definitely remember Mordor. That was a huge reveal. And then you also had a bringing together of all the different characters. I liked Numenor. I liked having them come in. That also reminded me of some of my favorite episodes from Game of Thrones, like the Battle of the Bastards. Can I say that here? Because that is the title of it. So I know there's a lot of things that I liked from other different places, but I liked how all the characters came together. And you're talking about character reveal. Well, there's when we really get to see with the Adar and Galadriel are having this interrogation, and we get to see then how Halbrand also is coming in here and everyone's reaction. And that's also, and then you also have characters about the Queen Muriel from Numenor, and that's going to really set the stage for other things of her going blind. And then Elendil losing his faith with being maybe on the side of the elves. So all of that, there's a lot of characters going on. There's a lot of action. A lot of the plot is being moved forward in episode 6. In episode 8, it's more setting up actually for season 2. So episode 6, I felt was just the strongest episode.
Episode 8 certainly setting us up for season 2, or the dessert, as Blakely would say. Blakely sending a bunch of people running to the freezer right now to get some ice cream.
I'm not a dessert person. Maybe that's it.
I like more steak than an ice cream scoop, but I will say that leaving us off the way episode 8 did was crucial for really everyone. It doesn't matter if you're somebody new to the show or you're like a hardcore Lord of the Rings fan. You wanted that kind of send off, but I feel like that really did start with the later half of the season in general. And season 6 to me is the one that I like how you referenced the Two Towers too, because it certainly had that feel. And that was really the first time that I felt any one of the original trilogy vibes in this new show, Rings of Power. And so, and also say, just being a comic for as long as I have, generally you can't get a lot of nerd references on stage in a general populace. Most folks know Mordor, though. I don't know about Gen Z. Maybe they need to catch up. Gen Alpha might already know Mordor, but I think Mordor passes the mustard just barely as far as being a Lord of the Rings touchstone. So Andrea gets the point here in round number 2, and we are tied at 1 apiece as we careen into round number 3. And this is going to be a tough one for you all to make a decision, just because we have so many different possibilities. It's best character. Best character. Who's the best character in all of season 1 of Rings of Power? Andrea, you get to tee off.
I liked Galadriel. I love elves. They're weird. They talk weird. And they're really pretty to look at. So yeah, I am like your baseline average. I like good hair. I appreciate Blakely talking about the good hair from, the first movies. I like elves. I really also liked Morfydd Clark's acting, and I hope that I have her name pronounced right. It's like Morfydd. She's Welsh. All the other elves felt like they were humans with pointy ears. She did not feel human. There was something very strange. She had so much emotion and rage coming out of her. And if you notice, she does not move her face and she barely moves her lips. It is the most mesmerizing thing to watch her. It's like, how is so much emotion coming out when you're like, it was very, very alien, and that intrigued me. And then I also really like that, I have to give my girl a little bit of girl gal some love. And it was actually another person, Caitlin, that said this, and I think that she said this better than I could possibly say. So I want to give her a shout out and quote her. And she said, I think it's so much more interesting to watch a character on a fuller arc than someone who's always been that way. She's here to be a commander. And to quote Viserys in Game of Thrones, she is not here to be suffocated by all this effing politicking. So as a woman who, sometimes works in a corporate world, and you're often told that you have to play politics in order to get things done instead of having these decisions based off your merit or your situation, I completely get the impulse to respond that way. It's not the smartest thing to do to basically say, F you, I'm right. I want to do it my way. But it is honest, and it's very true to her character. And also it's a really good arc throughout everything. So I really, really appreciated her. And also her fight scene in Numenor was like my fantasy.
And it's almost it's really nice to have Galadriel just in there anywhere, because it does give a lot of Lord of the Rings, maybe not the hardcore fans, but just folks who are aware of the franchise, some sort of starting point with, okay, I at least know who this person is and where they might go. Let's go over to Blakely for your best character. There's a lot to choose from. Who you got?
I love Halbrand. I don't love him, but I love the idea of the character, because I always find the villain inherently more interesting, their motivations and their backstories. And I think in the original Lord of the Rings trilogies and in The Hobbit, you see them as this kind of all-encompassing evil, whether bodied or disembodied as the eye. But I think seeing their capacity for trickery, seeing the capacity for what might be a semblance of connection, and that he actually offered her to be the queen. So there was some semblance of whatever it was, affection or wanting or caring for her. He was like, come do this, we can destroy this all together. Where it's like, okay, this villain does have capacity for connection. And I think a villain with capacity for connection or a particular viewpoint is always, I think it's kind of more interesting than the good guy. And I feel like also the capacity to deceive. I love The Usual Suspects. I love a Kaiser Sose moment. And I think it requires an incredibly layered performance, because you can't see it coming from too far away. But then once it happens, you have to be like, that makes sense. And I think that, like, in a similar way where I almost compare it to the heel turn of Khaleesi in Game of Thrones, where I was just like, no, I've been doing this that doesn't make a shred of sense to me. Then all of a sudden she's just evil. Like, that was like, okay, we're gonna land the plane. This was like, this made sense. And it was also one of the qualities which can be a boon to a prequel, where you know where it's going to end, so it does make sense and you have that pretext. And I feel like, again, whether you were new to this or true to this, as people say, I feel like he is the most interesting character in the first season, due to the capacity for the performance, both of the actor and of the figure from the story.
Yeah, Charlie Vickers, wonderful. And again, you show up as just this Southlander and you're like, okay, wait, what's going on here? And then we sort of piece together who this person really is, at least who we know them as. So we got a real good one and a real bad one, but they're both wonderful choices. Back to you, Andrea, for your rebuttal here in round 3.
I mean, Halbrand is great, but Halbrand would be nothing without Galadriel. He even says that. He is acting off of her. All of his acting is based off her decisions, and he's just in the corner kind of whispering things. So without her saving him, without her kind of driving the plot forward, there wouldn't be a Halbrand. She's driving the whole thing. And it's her realization that he's Sauron that's actually the big reveal and why we're excited about the dessert, Blakely. And also, come on, Halbrand had like one like fight scene in Numenor, but she had like this incredible fight scene where she was like we were saying earlier, our fantasies to go and like kick some butt, like rock up somewhere new, everyone doubts you, and then you go and like kick some butt, and then everyone is very impressed with you. So she does that with all those incredible soldiers. It's a great fight scene. And then when you're going in episode 6, she's just like casually dodging an arrow off of a horse, like she's upside down killing some orcs. I mean, she's an incredible fighter. She's incredible. Her character arc where she's, we wouldn't have the rings without her. So she's actually, her sword is making it. So if you want to talk about the rings of power, I mean, she's she's part of everything. And literally Halbrand needs someone to act off of. That's Galadriel.
And I think it's fair to say Galadriel may be burning more calories in season 1, but there's still a lot to this storyline of Halbrand becoming Sauron. So now the rebuttal for Blakely.
I think I agree with it, but I think you just made the argument that she's the best fighter. Like, yes, she is the most physical, but I also think all the things he did whispering in the corners are really, he was, if she was Pinocchio, he was Geppetto. Like he was puppeteering her to do those things. He was whispering in her ear to manipulate her and for the majority of the season, she fell for it. So I feel like she had the realization, but in reality, the person really, I feel like they say the pen is mightier than the sword, and his whispers were getting her to do what he wanted to do and keeping him alive to the point where he could, take ultimate power back. So I feel like he might have been the stiller character and the character that didn't do as much physical fighting, but he was the character actually manipulating and moving the person that was, which I think is why he's the most interesting character in the season.
And it's a great debate between these two characters because you really are wondering who is engineering this action, who is really the one who's kind of stepped back and looking at everything from the broad plan of it. Let's go back to Andrea for your final statement here in round 3.
Well, when you talk about characters, I feel like actually Galadriel actually had the character arc, because when you go back and you binge it a second time, you can see that Halbrand is always actually one note. He's always deceptive. His first word was, looks can be deceiving, but she actually has a character arc where she starts with really angry, kind of one note, and then she's starting to realize, I might be wrong. And that's why that episode 8 is so strong, is because she realizes, oh no, what did I do? This is really bad. And you can see that acting and kind of her head going, I totally fell for this. So I think that's much more interesting to see how then she's going to become this wise person. She actually had the character arc. And I think that she drives one of my, we'll get there later, but one of my favorite scenes. It's really her. Halbrand's interesting, but she is the more interesting character overall and the more interesting person to watch on screen, because that's also what's important as a character. Who was really interesting to watch on screen, and she was.
And so we sort of know where both of these careers are going to end up. But for season 1, certainly an interesting arc. And I also feel like Halbrand, obviously we know where that goes. So the final word in round 3 to Blakely.
I mean, I agree, but I think when we're talking about going back and looking at a performance or a character having layers, I feel like it's actually much more exciting to watch Halbrand knowing what they are going to do at the end, because it's a completely different person. All the motivations, every singular word said, even you quoted it, looks can be deceiving. You remember that because it has a completely different meaning the second time. And whereas, I do agree that Galadriel has a character arc. It's almost like it's a more traditional ragey to caring to betrayed, which we've seen literally 500 times through storytelling. But I feel like the truly duplicitous one character versus another being a complete and having every word have almost an opposite or completely different meaning upon second viewing makes Halbrand more interesting.
Oh man, and it makes this the toughest call I have by far today, because we're talking about great heroes and great villains. And I love the point that Blakely made about villains in general, where if they're always fun to watch, be scary and imposing, but if they show you what their point of view is, and you sort of look at that and you think like, oh well, Thanos, I mean, is he terrible? Yeah. Is he making some points? Yeah. But then you have Galadriel, and Andre, you made a point that really stuck with me, that like everybody else feels like they're humans with the pointy ears, but Galadriel, really, that performance really takes it to a place where you feel like it is a different sort of species, really, than what you get with just a random human or an orc or a hobbit or anything else. And I feel like Galadriel being that first latching on point for a lot of fans really wins the point here in season one. Now where we go from there, I could totally change my tune after seeing season two, but just seeing the way things play out in season one, I feel like Galadriel, to your point, had a lot more to do, I think, and a lot more different set pieces to enjoy than what Halbrand and Sauron got. But I still feel like Galadriel gets the point. And now y'all are really making me work, though. I was not prepared to think this hard for this episode
against evil. Are you for the good people?
I mean, usually I enjoy watching the evil ones more, especially, around this time of year, but you get the point. Andre's up 2-1. And so now we head into topic 4, and this is going to get really fun because we're talking about the most shocking moment. What is the most shocking moment in all of season 1? So that is going to be going to Blakely first. What is your most shocking moment in all of season 1?
I think it was kind of like the fake out reveal of the actor Daniel Wayman as the stranger, thinking he was going to be Sauron and then realizing that he is a wizard and probably Gandalf. So I feel like that had the most knee jerk, where you got 2 for 1, because you kind of like, there was a suspicion, if you've watched the show before, that this person who speaks different languages, who has some kind of magical ability, who, the Harfoots have some kind of like loyalty to, could be someone evil or could be that knee jerk. And you have these kind of 3 evil figures that come and pledge fealty to him, and he's like, "Wait, that's not me." And you're like, "Well, then who are you?" And then you get the roller coaster of good, then bad, then good, or mystery, then oh no, and then okay, all at once. So that was kind of the most interesting and shocking reveal, because it was a 2 for 1.
Yeah, and it was also why I was sort of glad that I stayed off social media. At least, like, I got rid of all the hashtags, because I am sort of a dummy, if you didn't know by now, and I don't always piece things together as quick as the next person, especially a huge fan invested in this from the start. So not knowing a lot, it was really rewarding to watch, and it's probably the way I'll watch subsequent seasons as well. Over to you, Andre. You and Blakely are both well steeped in this world. So what was your most shocking moment?
Well, first, I just want to give a shout out to Blakely. Can we all agree that one of his creepiest characters was the witches during that reveal scene?
Yeah.
With the blue eyes and the short hair. I was like, wow, that was good. But that's not my choice. Not my choice. Okay. So my choice is the reveal of Halbrand as Sauron. By far my favorite scene. It was actually a sequence, and I thought it was really well done. So it starts off where Galadriel is confronting Halbrand. I'm like, who are you really? And then he kind of takes her on to different journeys. And so the first scene is with Sauron as her older brother, Finrod, who's now dead. And the acting is exquisite by, let me check out his name. It's Will Fletcher. So you can actually go back and look at the two. They kind of go online about the screenshots of how he is as the older brother and then as Sauron as the older brother, and very subtle acting, really good. And then it goes on to the raft and the upside down reveal of what they could be together. So she's looking into the water and the camera goes whoop, and then you finally see him as Sauron with the big hat that we know, and her looking gorgeous and elfish as the queen. I think is just my favorite shot. Then you get the raft dialogue of then Halbrand revealing all the ways that he was deceptive and whispering and kind of guiding her along. And you can see in her face, it's like, oh no, I was just gaslit. Oh my goodness. And again, very subtle. And then the close-up scenes were my favorite, where it's kind of a battle of wills and they do a really close-up like this. And then if you go and check out later, as he's getting more and more angry, they make his eyes redder and redder. And finally at the end, when he yells, they do the Eye of Sauron. And at the first one, you might miss it because it's very subtle. Then you go back and it's absolutely incredible. So that whole sequence of the reveal, there might have been some people that saw it a mile away. Even with there's a lot of people that love to hate. They love to hate watch, but it is, even if you saw it a mile away, the execution of that reveal was fantastic. It was worth $250 million.
I was going to say it was one of those reveals where like I really saw, I thought my TV was leaking money. Like it was like, wow, this is really what we spent all this on. And so, you get away from just the dollars and cents of it. And it just was a beautifully executed turn. But really both of these, I mean, we're talking about a play action pass versus a flea flicker where both you're sort of thrown for a loop. And it seems like Blakely, even you who are much, more adept in this world than I might be, this one kind of shocked you.
Yeah, because I had kind of an inkling on who the stranger was from the beginning. Because again, the semi-magical abilities, maybe he has some kind of amnesia, etc., or maybe he's like, really like taking over the center of somebody else's body, etc. But I think while cinematography and cinematically, I do agree the Hallbrand reveal is gorgeous. I think it is less shocking because I feel like you get like, oh, this is that evil I thought it was. No, it's not. And then it kind of shifts the other characters. Then you have to go off and think, what, this was a red herring, but also this is a good guy, so fun. This is nice. He's not no one. He's still someone incredibly important who will have an impact on future seasons. But I think in terms of the turmoil back and forth and the options for where the things are going for the characters are more thorough with that reveal. But I do agree cinematically, I mean, the Hallbrand reveal was gorgeous. It was,
I mean, the whole season felt like a great movie, and so that's just that. Again, I have a pretty nice sized TV to watch this stuff on, but I felt like I was in a movie theater. Season 1, episode 1 through 8. So let's go back to Andrea for a little bit more on the shock that was who Sauron is.
Well, I think the producers did a really good job of having this reveal go towards the end and keep people guessing, especially those that were really involved. So shout out to Amazon. But I do think that the Hellbron, when you go back, so I didn't know as much of the stuff. Like now I'm learning because I like to nerd out on the podcast and the different YouTube things of like he's known for being really deceptive and saying the gifts. And so they just do that really subtle. And then there's like these subtle hints that these subtle kind of threats that is happening. So once you get that reveal, that scene is then what makes the rewatch and the binge again so enjoyable. And then you can see all the little hints that go, and that for me felt much more interesting than is it Gandalf? Do we know if it's Gandalf? Like, we don't actually know who he is. I'm good. That's his major line. I'm good. Like, I actually kind of liked it. It was cheesy, but I liked that line. But I mean, it's not as good as this is Sauron.
Hey, I needed that line because again, I'm more of a dummy watching this. So I'm like, can I just get everybody to wear their okay, you're good. I got
when
that.
I first saw that, I was like, Nori, danger girl. He's killing fireflies. This is for the Meteor Man. I was like, uh-oh.
All right, so back to Blakely here for your final statement in round 4, the moment that shocked you the most.
Again, I think it is the reveal of the stranger, the fake out reveal of the stranger, who I'm going to assume is Gandalf, as Sauron. I think it gave me the most emotional shaking on where things were going, and it also gave me a fake out. That it gave me a 2-for-1 shock, and that's why I think it's the best.
Double the pleasure, double the fun. Exactly. Let's go back to Andrea for your final statement. Going to close up shop here in round 4.
I think, the final statement I would just say is that it's really about, for me, with the shockingness of it is that not only is the Sauron reveal, but also how well executed it is. Because remember, this is a TV show, and I want to kind of say it from a producer's perspective. During COVID, I tried to write a TV script. Very difficult. Now I know what a tortured artist is. I learned that like there's bigger sizes of wine when I tried to write. Yeah. So it's very difficult to put together these types of things, especially if you're putting hints throughout. And so you can have an idea, but at the end of the day, it's all about execution. And this was really well done. It was shocking, even for those that knew about it beforehand or had guessed. It was so well done. We should appreciate it. And then again, for those that might have watched it one time, I really go back and watch the close-ups and see the eyes, because it is really, really cool in that reveal.
It is a very cool reveal, and congrats to you for being so productive artistically during the pandemic. I
was
bought an
productive
air
with my
fryer.
wine drinking. Are you kidding me? That's hard.
You gotta have something. You gotta have a nice. Life is all about balance, kids. And when we look at the balance in terms of the most shocking moment, the reveal of Halbrand as Sauron was, I think, the most artistically impressive look to me. And I think it did feel like I was in a movie theater. Newport News, Virginia is where I saw the very first Lord of the Rings movie. Felt like I was back there. But as far as the actual shock value goes, the 2-for-1 that Blakely's given me, I'm like, yeah, there is. And again, it's not a stamped, notarized guarantee that that's going to become Gandalf. I'm with you. I feel like that's who we are ultimately going to get. But just to see the way that that's sort of completely flipped the switch, I feel like that was a bit more of a shocking reveal. Maybe not as gorgeous on a big screen, but that was the most shocking reveal of all of season 1 to me, as a matter of fact. So that gets the point. And lo and behold, we're tied after 4 rounds. It's 2-2 with 2 great panelists. By the way, making their debut on Binge Battle and really come into play. This is the most I've ever learned about any one topic while hosting this show. And so we're a little short on time, but I do want to get to our tiebreaker round. So here's how it's going to work. You each have up to a minute, it can be 45 seconds. It can be the full 60 if you need it, for our final tiebreaker topic here. And then I'll have to make a decision. And that is, as we like to do on Binge Battle, sometimes we're doing notes. We're being producers. We're in the room now, and we're making season 2, and we're trying to make an improved show like season 1. What do we do to season 2? What do we want in there? That's the big question. What do you want to see in season 2? And we're going to kick off with Andrea. You have up to a minute on the clock, and that's all you got.
All right. So, for our round 1, you said that's just okay, right? Blakely got a point for that. That was just okay.
I do remember that.
Because it was a setup. All right. So we already got a point for that. So I'm going to add to that for season 2. I would definitely like a pace change. And let's just get a little bit faster. Every scene was about like 1 minute, 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes too long. Every shot was maybe like 2 seconds too long, which made it difficult to rewatch on the binge. And there was a lot of setup. So I'd like to see a little bit more for season 2 of like, let's having the payoffs and a little bit more character development and fun. So my favorite scenes were with the dwarves, because they actually had charisma. Halbrand had a lot of charisma. A lot of the actors, I think the note was given just to cry. Like literally there was tears in every single eye. I feel like they had someone just with teardrops going, which is very dramatic, but I would love a little bit more charisma, a little bit of pep and step.
The dwarves were great. They had a lot of charisma. I feel like just as a kid, you just assume elves have a crap ton of personality just because I know them from Santa's workshop, but maybe they're just kind of drips when it's not the season of giving. So let's go to Blakely for really the final argument we're going to hear in today's show. What do you want to see in season 2?
For season 2, I'd love to see, now that we have the familiarity of at least 2 or 3 characters that we know from the film series, almost like a little bit of standalone stakes. Like I want to see a little bit of Star Wars Rogue One action where you know something that fundamentally happened, and you get to care about these characters, but then you know what, maybe they all die. Because I think what season 1 suffered from was, once you have a feeling of who is who, they have to survive this because they have to go into the future trilogies. I want those characters that are now kind of lending their familiarity to the adventures they might have taken in those years between now and the movies, and to get attached to people who we know affect the further storyline that we don't know what's going to happen to them, which will add an element of surprise to the series. And I think also in shows like this, a nice little standalone episode that has an effect that's much longer down the road is always really special. And it kind of gives you more jarring movement and stakes.
Oh, man. Well, the one rule I have on this show, well, I have 2, try not to swear. And then the other one I have is I can't possibly call any end of an episode a tie, even though you're both giving me great notes. I want a little bit quicker on the pace, but I also want some standalone stakes. And so if I think about what I need more, Lord of the Rings, as we intimated already on this episode, is that there's an action movie in the 90s called The Long Kiss Goodbye. You can also use that title for the end of Return of the King or the end of the Battle of Five Armies. I mean, this is a show that by nature, it's full of itself. It's that person at a dinner party that just can't stop talking because they have all these great stories. So we want to learn for it. I like a pacing change. So I like Andrea's note, but hearing that we could get like a Rogue One where we don't actually know what the ending of this particular character is going to be, and the emotional attachment that we might forge in season 1 to season 2 about some of these folks that we fall in love with, if they just suddenly end, or God forbid they all do, like the end of Rogue One, then we start to really care about it, even though we know where we're going eventually thousands of years later. So by the slimmest of margins, I have to give the win here to Blakely. I feel like Andrea made a great point though too. So if you're a producer on the show watching this, take both of their notes for season 2, which as of the filming of this, I think is just now underway in the United Kingdom. They did some in New Zealand. Now they're going to do UK for season 2, I believe. Blakely is your winner today, but you're both victors in my book. Sterling debuts here on Binge Battle. Blakely, you are the champion today, so you get to go first when I ask you the most important question. Where can all of your new fans follow you? Where can they check out the stuff you're working on?
You can find me on Instagram at Blakely Thornton, and also on TikTok. I am one of the oldest humans on TikTok at 36 years old. And you can catch me as a panelist on the upcoming Vice show Queer Sports about the LGBTQIA experience in American sporting culture this January.
There you go. So keep an eye open for that in January. And then you also have the Instagram and the TikTok. Over to you, Andrea. When you're not traveling all around the world, you're just sinking your teeth into all this nerd stuff, covering really all things pop culture. What is your sort of base of operations?
You can also follow me on Instagram at Andrea Fechko. Good luck with my last name. A little Ukrainian last name back there.
Feczko?
Yes. Whoa, you get a point there.
It took me 15 years, but I finally got it.
And then for this final season of The Walking Dead, I'll be a panelist talking about it, which I'm really excited about.
I can't believe we're finally ending Walking Dead. It's been such a journey with that show, and it's going to be such a journey here with the future of the Rings of Power. And so y'all try to clear your schedules a little bit, because we both love to have you back, both of you back on Binge Battle sooner rather than later. It was just a wonderful episode today. And I think we actually got to do what those after shows that Andre's talking about for a lot of folks watching today. We got to ingratiate a little bit more into the world of Rings of Power. Thanks to Andrea Fechko and Blakely Thornton, our incredible producer, Christian Ruvalcaba, his wonderful dog Draco, and the whole gang here at Rotten Tomatoes. Once again, head to RottenTomatoes.com for all the latest in the world of Rings of Power, House of the Dragon, movies, TV, everything in between. I am merely Mark Ellis. You can get upcoming tour dates at markellis.live, including my new stand-up hour special, which is going to be taping in Los Angeles December 3rd. That's where you can get tickets, markellis.live. We'll see you real soon here on Binge Battle. Take care.